The apex beasts of the galaxy feared nothing, until they met a human who didn't flinch the cargo ship morning. Calm drifted through the dark space near Threshold Station. Inside the bridge, Lieutenant Kim Dae-hyun checked his navigation screens with the same bored expression he wore every day. Another routine supply run. Another 12 hours of flying through empty space. He sipped his coffee and wished he had brought something more interesting to read. The galaxy in 2547 was a crowded place. Hundreds of alien species traded, fought, and lived among the stars. Most of them got along reasonably well. Most of them followed the basic rules of civilized society. But there were exceptions. There were monsters. The Vrakos were those monsters. Every species in the known galaxy feared them. They stood 12 feet tall, covered in black armor-like skin that could stop most weapons. 4 massive arms ended in claws that could tear through steel. Their heads were broad and flat, with too many teeth and eyes that glowed a sickly yellow in the dark. But the worst part was not how they looked. The worst part was the sound they made. When a Vrakos wanted to intimidate someone, it released a deep rumbling sound from its chest. The sound was so low that most species could not even hear it properly. But they could feel it. The sound touched something deep in the brain, something ancient and primal. It triggered pure, mindless terror. Every species that encountered the Vrakos for the first time ended up paralyzed with fear, unable to think or move or even breathe properly. The Vrakos had used this advantage to build an empire. 47 star systems bowed to their rule. They did not need large armies. They did not need complex strategies. They simply showed up, made their terrible sound, and watched as entire populations surrendered without a fight. Dae-hyun knew all of this. Everyone knew this. The Terran colonial fleet had standing orders to avoid Vrakos territory at all costs. But space was vast and borders were unclear, and sometimes cargo ships ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. The alarm started blaring before Dae-hyun could finish his coffee. His co-pilot, a nervous young man named Park Jun-ho, jumped in his seat and started frantically checking the sensors. Contact! 3 ships approaching fast. They're not responding to hails. Dae-hyun set down his coffee carefully and looked at the screens. 3 large vessels, clearly military, closing in on their position. The designs were unmistakable. Vrakos hunter ships. Well, Dae-hyun said calmly, that's not good. Jun-ho stared at him with wide eyes. Not good, not good. We need to run. We need to call for help. We need to stay calm, Dae-hyun interrupted. Running won't work. They're faster than us. Help won't arrive in time. We're in the middle of nowhere. So let's just see what they want. Behind them, the other 3 crew members had gone completely silent. Their faces were pale. One of them was shaking. The Vrakos ship surrounded the morning calm in a perfect triangle formation. Dae-hyun had to admit it was impressive flying. Then his communications console crackled with a harsh, grating voice speaking broken galactic common. Human vessel. You enter our space. You stop engines now. We board. You no resist. Dae-hyun pressed the transmit button. This is Lieutenant Kim Dae-hyun of the Terran Colonial Fleet. We're a cargo vessel on a scheduled supply run. We didn't realize we had crossed into your territory. If you'll allow us to... The transmission cut off. A heavy thud echoed through the ship. Then another. The Vrakos were attaching boarding tubes to their hull. Jun-ho was breathing too fast now, almost hyperventilating. The others looked like they might faint at any moment. Dae-hyun stood up and straightened his uniform. Listen to me, he said quietly. Whatever happens, stay calm. Don't make sudden movements. Don't try to be heroes. Just breathe and let me talk to them. Understand? They nodded, though he doubted they had really heard him. The airlock door screamed as something forced it open from the outside. Metal groaned and bent. Then the door fell inward with a crash that made everyone jump. Everyone except Dae-hyun. 3 Vrakos warriors entered the bridge. They had to duck to fit through the doorway. Their forearms scraped against the walls as they spread out to surround the human crew. The yellow eyes fixed on each person in turn, studying them like a cat studies a mouse before pouncing. Then they made the sound. It started as a low vibration that Dae-hyun felt in his chest and his bones. It grew deeper, stronger, until it filled the entire bridge. The sound bypassed his ears and went straight to the oldest parts of his brain, the parts that remembered when humans were prey animals hiding from things with bigger teeth. Jun-ho collapsed to his knees, gasping. The others pressed themselves against the walls. eyes wide with mindless terror. One of them started crying. Daehyun felt the fear response trying to take hold. His heart rate increased slightly. His muscles tensed. His brain offered him a dozen reasons to panic right now. He ignored all of them. Instead, he finished reviewing the navigation data on his screen. He made a small correction to their drift calculations. He noted that the coffee had spilled during the boarding, and that was mildly annoying because it would stain. The Vrakos warriors stopped making their sound. They stood perfectly still, confused. The lead warrior, larger than the others and covered in scars that told of countless battles, moved closer to Daehyun. It leaned down until its face was inches from his. The breath was hot and smelled like rotting meat. The teeth were each the size of Daehyun's thumb. Daehyun looked up from his console and met the creature's eyes directly. "Are you finished?" he asked in a tone he had once used with a particularly stubborn city councilman. "Because we're on a schedule and I'd like to get back to it." The Vrakos warrior froze. Its eyes widened slightly. It made a strange clicking sound deep in its throat that might have been confusion or surprise or perhaps just disbelief. The other two warriors moved closer, studying Daehyun like he was some kind of impossible puzzle. "You not afraid?" the lead warrior said slowly. It was not a question but a statement of something that should not be possible. "I'm aware you could kill me," Daehyun replied. "You're bigger, stronger, and have more weapons. That's just a fact. But being afraid doesn't change those facts, so what would be the point?" He had learned this approach during his years as a crisis negotiator in Seoul. When someone held a gun to your head, panicking did not help. When someone threatened to jump off a building, showing fear only made things worse. Fear was just information. Large predator, possible danger, take precautions. Once you acknowledge the information, you could move on to solving the problem. The Vrakos seemed completely unable to process this response. They looked at each other, then back at Daehyun, then at each other again. "What you called?" the lead warrior demanded. "Lieutenant Kim Daehyun. I am Warlord Thexmore. I kill 300 beings in combat. Conquered 7 worlds. Never show mercy." The warrior seemed to be trying to re-establish its credentials as something terrifying. "That's nice," Daehyun said. He meant it politely, the way you might acknowledge someone telling you about their job. Thexmore made a frustrated growling sound. He turned to his warriors and they spoke in their own language, harsh and full of clicking noises. They seemed to be arguing about something. Finally, Thexmore turned back to Daehyun. "You come with us." "Where?" "Our homeworld. High Command will see you. We'll understand why you're broken." "I'm not broken," Daehyun said. "I'm just busy. Can we schedule this for another time?" For the first time in Vrakos history, a warlord had no idea what to say. The apex beasts of the galaxy feared nothing until they met a human who didn't flinch. The Vrakos hunter ship was not designed for comfort. Daehyun sat in what he assumed was a holding cell, though it looked more like a storage room with the boxes removed. The walls were bare metal. The floor was cold. There was no bed, just a raised platform that might have been meant for sitting. He sat on it and waited. Through the small window in the door, he could see Vrakos crew members walking past every few minutes. They would slow down, look at him, make confused clicking sounds, and then move on. He waved at a few of them. They hurried away faster. 3 days into the journey, a young Vrakos warrior entered his cell. This one was smaller than the others, probably equivalent to a teenager in human terms. Its armor was lighter colored, not yet darkened by age and battle. The young warrior stood in the doorway for a long moment, studying Daehyun with tilted head. "You really not afraid?" it asked. The Galactic Common was better than Thexmore's, clearer and with less growling. "Not particularly," Daehyun replied. "Should I be? All beings fear Vrakos, is natural law. Prey fears predator, weak fears strong. I suppose that makes sense from your perspective." Daehyun gestured to the empty space beside him on the platform. "Do you want to sit?" He looked tired from standing guard. The young Vrakos hesitated, then sat. The platform groaned under the weight but held. "I am Greltok," the warrior said. "I am on first hunt voyage. All my life I hear stories of how lesser beings scream and run when they see us." "But you just sit here drinking." "What is that?" "Coffee, want some?" Daehyun held out his cup. He had managed to convince one of the crew members to bring him his coffee supplies from the morning calm before they left. The crew member had been so confused by the request that they complied without thinking. Greltok sniffed the coffee suspiciously, then took a tiny sip. All four eyes widened. This is terrible. Bitter and hot and wrong. Yeah, it's an acquired taste, Daehyun admitted, taking the cup back. So first hunt voyage? How's it going so far? Strange. Very strange. Greltok shifted uncomfortably. We supposed to be teaching lesser species to fear us, to respect Vrykos' power. But you don't fear. You don't respect. You just exist like we are nothing. I wouldn't say you're nothing, Daehyun said thoughtfully. You're clearly very powerful. Your ships are well designed. Your combat tactics seem solid. You've built an impressive empire. I just don't see why I need to be afraid to acknowledge those facts. But fear is how we know we are strong. If others not fear us, then maybe we not truly strong. Daehyun considered this. It was an interesting insight into Vrykos psychology. So your strength only exists if others validate it through fear? I do not understand question. Let me put it differently. If you were alone in the universe with no one to fear you, would you still be strong? Greltok's eyes unfocused slightly, like the question had short-circuited something in its brain. After a long moment, it stood up and left the cell without another word. Over the next week, more Vrykos came to visit. They all seemed to have the same basic confusion. They would try different intimidation tactics. One would roar directly in Daehyun's face. Another would describe in detail how they had destroyed their enemies. A third would make elaborate shows of weapon practice outside his cell. Daehyun responded to each with polite interest. He pointed out that the roaring technique would be more effective if they approached from behind where their target couldn't see it coming. He noted that one warrior's story about conquering a colony didn't make tactical sense because they had left their supply lines exposed. He complimented the weapons practice but suggested adjustments to their stance that would improve efficiency. By the 10th day, half the crew was avoiding his cell entirely. The other half kept coming back with new questions. Warlord Thexmore finally entered on the 11th day. The massive warrior filled the doorway completely. My crew is confused, Thexmore said bluntly. They question things they never questioned before. You are disease. You infect minds with doubt. I'm just answering their questions, Daehyun replied. If that causes doubt, maybe the questions were already there. Vrykos do not doubt. Vrykos conquer. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Good strategists doubt their plans so they can improve them. Good warriors doubt their techniques so they can refine them. Doubt isn't weakness. It's how you get stronger. Thexmore was silent for a long time. Then he said something that surprised Daehyun. You were warrior? Before flying cargo ships? Not exactly. I negotiated with dangerous people. Hostage situations mostly. People who were desperate and scared and holding weapons. And you not feared them? I was aware of the danger. But showing fear would have made everything worse. The person with the weapon is already scared. If I'm scared too, then everyone makes bad decisions. Someone needs to stay calm so problems can be solved. We are not problems to be solved, Thexmore growled. We are apex predators of galaxy. Sure, Daehyun agreed. And sharks are apex predators in Earth's oceans. But sharks don't need other fish to know they're scary. They just hunt efficiently and move on. They don't build empires based on fear. They don't need others to validate their strength. They just are strong. This was clearly not a comparison Thexmore had expected. The warlord left without responding. That night, Daehyun could hear arguing in the crew quarters. The Vrykos language was harsh and guttural, but he could pick out certain repeated words. Human. Fear. Wrong. Doubt. He sighed and tried to sleep. This was turning into a much more complicated supply run than he had anticipated. On the 14th day, Greltok returned to his cell. The young warrior looked troubled. I think about your question, Greltok said quietly, about being strong alone. And I realize I do not know answer. All my life, strength means making others afraid. If no one is afraid, I do not know what strength is. Strength is capability, Daehyun said. It's what you can do, not what others feel about it. You're strong because you can lift heavy things, move fast, fight effectively. Those are facts about your body and skills. They exist whether I'm scared or not. But we are taught that fear is respect, that making others afraid is same as earning their respect. Fear and respect are completely different things. I can fear a natural disaster, but I don't respect it. I can respect a skilled artist, but I don't fear them. Daehyun paused. Do you respect me? Greltok looked surprised by the question. I think maybe yes. You do something none have done before. You challenge everything we believe, but you do it without violence or anger. That is, I do not have word for it. The word is courage, Daehyun said. And respect is about recognizing someone's qualities, not about being afraid of them. More crew members started visiting after that conversation. They would ask questions about human culture, about fear, about respect. Daehyun answered as best he could, though he suspected his impromptu philosophy lessons were causing more problems than they solved. On the 18th day, Warlord Thexmore made an announcement to the entire crew. Daehyun couldn't understand most of it, but he caught the important part. They would arrive at the Vrakos homeworld tomorrow. Greltok came to his cell one last time that evening. High Command will test you, the young warrior said. They will try to break you. To make you afraid. To prove that Vrakos way is correct. What happens if they can't? Daehyun asked. Greltok's eyes showed something that might have been fear. Then everything changes. Everything we are, everything we believe. All of it becomes question instead of answer. Is that such a bad thing? For my people? Maybe his end of civilization? Daehyun thought about that for a while after Greltok left. He hadn't intended to cause an existential crisis for an entire species. He had just been trying to stay calm and get through an unusual situation. But somehow, simply by not being afraid, he had become a threat to everything the Vrakos had built. He finished his coffee and tried to sleep. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. The apex beasts of the galaxy feared nothing, until they met a human who didn't flinch. The homeworld of the Vrakos was called Krevnar, which translated roughly to World of Eternal Strength in Galactic Common. From orbit, it looked like a dark green sphere wrapped in gray clouds. Daehyun watched through the ship's view screen as they descended through the atmosphere. The landscape below was covered in massive structures that looked more like fortresses than cities. Everything was built for war. They landed in a vast arena that could easily hold 50,000 beings. It was already full. Thousands upon thousands of Vrakos packed the stone seats, all watching as the ship's door opened and Daehyun was led out in restraints. The restraints were unnecessary. He had no plans to run. Where would he even go? The arena floor was bare rock, worn smooth by countless battles. In the center stood a raised platform where 9 enormous Vrakos waited. These were clearly the leaders, the High Command. Their armor was decorated with symbols and scars. Their eyes glowed brighter than the others. Warlord Thexmore led Daehyun to the platform. The crowd made their deep rumbling sounds, creating a wave of subsonic fear that rolled across the arena. Daehyun felt it press against him like a physical force. His body wanted to respond with panic. His brain offered chemicals that would make him run or fight or freeze. He took a slow breath and let the feeling pass through him without taking hold. It was just sensation, just information, nothing more. The largest Vrakos on the platform stepped forward. This one was ancient, covered in scars that told of 1,000 battles. Its voice was deeper than the others, resonating in Daehyun's chest. I am Supreme Apex Vrakor. I have ruled Vrakos people for 30 cycles. I have conquered more worlds than you have years of life. The creature leaned down until its face was level with Daehyun's. You will fear me. I'm sure you're very accomplished. Daehyun replied politely. Congratulations on the successful career. The crowd went silent. Apparently no one had ever responded to the Supreme Apex with polite acknowledgement before. Vrakor's eyes narrowed. You are broken. Something wrong with your biology. We will fix this. We will show you what fear is. I know what fear is, Daehyun said. I just choose not to be controlled by it. There is no choice. Fear is natural response. Prey fears predator. This is law of nature. It's a law of biology, maybe. But humans have gotten pretty good at overriding biological impulses. We can hold our breath even when our body says to breathe. We can fast even when hungry. We can stay calm even when scared. That's kind of our thing. Vrakor turned to address the crowd. This human claims fear is choice, claims that prey can simply decide not to fear predator. We will prove this wrong. We will break this delusion. The crowd roared approval, and Daehyun noticed that their roar sounded less unified than before. Some voices were enthusiastic. Others seemed uncertain. You will face trial of dominance, Vrakor declared. 3 tests. If you survive with mind broken and fear in eyes, we prove Vrakos way is true. If you die, you die. What if I survive without breaking? Dahyun asked. The question seemed to genuinely confuse Vrakor. That is not possible, but hypothetically. Then, Vrakor paused as if the thought had never occurred to him. Then we are wrong about everything, Dahyun nodded. Okay, that's fair. What's the first test? They brought him to a chamber beneath the arena. The room was small and completely sealed. Warlord Thexmore explained while they prepared the test. This is Pit of Terrors. We fill air with fear chemicals. Natural predator sense. Sounds that trigger panic in all species. No being has lasted more than 3 minutes before mind breaks completely. How long do I need to last? Dahyun asked. 1 hour. They sealed him inside. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air vents opened and the room filled with something. Dahyun's nose burned with the smell of things that wanted to eat him. His ears picked up sounds that his brain interpreted as danger approaching from every direction. The chemicals in the air made his heart race and his hands shake. His body was screaming at him to panic. Every instinct he had was firing at once, demanding that he run or fight or do something anything other than just stand here. Dahyun sat down cross-legged on the floor. He closed his eyes and began the breathing exercises he had learned during negotiation training. 4 counts in. Hold for 4. 4 counts out. Hold for 4, repeat. The panic was just chemicals. The fear was just signals. They were information, nothing more. He acknowledged them and let them pass through without grabbing hold. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Steady rhythm. Focus on the breath, not the screaming instincts. After about 15 minutes, his body started to adapt. The chemicals were still there. The sounds were still present, but they became background noise. Like traffic sounds in Seoul or the hum of a ship's engines. Present but not important. After 30 minutes, he was actually bored. He opened his eyes and looked around the chamber. The walls were interesting. Some kind of volcanic rock, probably native to this planet. There were patterns in the stone that looked almost intentional. After 45 minutes, he lay down and took a nap. When they opened the chamber after exactly 1 hour, they found him sleeping peacefully. The attending Vrakos physicians checked his vital signs 3 times, certain their instruments were broken. The crowd in the arena had watched everything on large view screens. The silence now was absolute. Supreme Apex Vrakor stared at Dahyun like he was looking at an impossible thing. You slept. I was tired, Dahyun explained. The breathing exercises are relaxing. I guess I dozed off. Sorry, was I supposed to stay awake? No one seemed to know how to respond to that. The second test was scheduled for the next day. They wanted time to prepare, though Dahyun suspected they really wanted time to figure out what was happening. He was returned to a holding cell where Greltok visited him that evening. The entire homeworld is arguing, the young warrior said quietly. Half say you are using technology to block fear. Half say you are proof that Vrakos' way is flawed. Fights breaking out in streets. I'm sorry, Dahyun said and meant it. I didn't intend to cause problems. You do nothing except exist. That is what makes it worse. You not attacking us. You not declaring us wrong. You just are not afraid. And that enough to make everything we believe start falling apart. What do you believe, Greltok? The young warrior was quiet for a long time. I believe. Maybe strength is more complicated than we thought. Maybe fear is not same as respect. Maybe. Greltok's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Maybe we are not as strong as we thought we were. You're still strong, Dahyun said gently. You just might be strong in different ways than you realized. After Greltok left, Dahyun stood at the small window in his cell. Outside, he could see Vrakos moving through the fortress city. Some walked with the same confident swagger he had seen before. Others moved more slowly, uncertain. He had been trained to negotiate with individuals, not to accidentally deconstruct an entire civilization's belief system. This was getting complicated. The second test began at dawn. The hunt would take place in the wilderness beyond the city. Dahyun was given a 6-hour head start. Then a full hunting pack would come after him. If he survived until sunset, he passed. If they caught him before then, the test was over. They dropped him in a dense forest of purple-barked trees. The moment they left, Dahyun started looking around. He found a stream, some edible-looking plants, and a good spot for a camp. He built a small fire, ate some of the plants, and sat down to wait. When the hunting pack arrived 3 hours later, they found him roasting something over the fire. The apex beast of the galaxy feared nothing until they met a human who didn't flinch. The hunting pack stood at the edge of the clearing, completely frozen. Their prey was supposed to be running, hiding, or at least looking worried. Instead, the human sat by a fire, cooking something that smelled surprisingly good. Daehyun looked up from his meal. "Oh, hello. You made excellent time. I thought you'd take longer to find me, but your tracking is really efficient." He gestured to the fire. "I found these root vegetables growing near the stream. Want some?" "There's plenty." The pack leader, a scarred warrior named Thulkar, approached slowly. This was his 297th hunt. He had never seen prey behave like this. "You not run," Thulkar observed. Running seemed inefficient. "You're faster than me. You know this terrain better. I'd just tire myself out and you'd catch me anyway." Daehyun took a bite of the roasted root. "Plus I was hungry." "You supposed to be afraid. I am aware you could kill me. That fact hasn't changed since this morning." Daehyun pulled another root from the fire and offered it to Thulkar. "But it's still 3 hours until sunset, and standing around being scared for 3 hours sounds exhausting." Thulkar took the root vegetable automatically, too confused to refuse. He bit into it. His eyes widened slightly. It was good. The other pack members slowly moved into the clearing. They kept their weapons ready, but they seemed uncertain what to do. One of them sat down near the fire. Then another. Within minutes, the entire hunting pack was sitting around Daehyun's campfire, eating roasted vegetables. "Your tracking formation was good," Daehyun commented, "but you were making too much noise on approach. I heard you coming from half a kilometer away. If you want to hunt more effectively, try spreading out more and stepping heel to toe to reduce sound." Thulkar stared at him. "You give us advice on how to hunt you better?" "Well, yes. If you're going to do something, you should do it well." Back in the arena, the Supreme Apex watched the view screen in stunned silence. The crowd was murmuring, confused. This was supposed to be a test of survival. Instead, it looked like a very strange picnic. When sunset came and Daehyun passed the second test, there was no cheering, just uncertain silence. That night, Daehyun was moved to a different cell. This one had a window overlooking the city. He could see Vrkos gathering in the streets, arguing. Some were gesturing angrily. Others looked lost, confused. Greltok appeared at his door. The young warrior looked troubled. "The council meets tonight," Greltok said. "They debate what to do. Some say you use mind control. Others say you are proof that fear-based dominance is false. What do you think?" "I think," Greltok paused, "I think I have lived my whole life believing strength means making others afraid. But you show different kind of strength. Strength to not be controlled by fear, to stay calm when everything says to panic. That is harder than making others afraid." Before Daehyun could respond, alarms blared throughout the fortress. Greltok's communication device crackled with urgent messages in the Vrkos language. "What's happening?" Daehyun asked. "Your people. They come for you." High above the planet, 3 Terran military ships had just dropped out of hyperspace. Leading them was the fighter pilot Kim Taemin, Daehyun's younger brother. When Taemin had learned his brother was captured by the Vrkos, he had immediately begun planning a rescue. His commanding officer, Captain Lee Minji, had tried to stop him. When she couldn't, she joined him instead. "This is insane," Captain Minji said from the command ship. "We're 3 vessels against an entire planet of warriors." "That's my brother down there," Taemin replied from his fighter cockpit. "I'm not leaving him." What they didn't know was that Dr. Park Hana, a xenobiologist studying the Vrkos, had been monitoring the situation. She had sent intelligence to the rescue team about the fortress layout, and Operative Yoon Ji-woo, disguised as a member of a client species, was already on the planet's surface preparing to help from inside. The Terran ships began their approach to the planet. Vrkos defense forces scrambled to intercept. In the fortress, Supreme Apex Vrkor stormed into Daehyun's cell with a dozen guards. "Your people attack," Vrkor roared. "This was planned all along. You distract us while they prepare invasion." "That's my brother being an idiot," Daehyun said calmly, though inside he was cursing Taemin's predictable recklessness. "He's probably acting without orders, and he's going to get himself killed. We will kill him first. We will destroy all your ships." We will what?" a new voice interrupted. Thulkar entered the cell, followed by Greltok and several other warriors. "We will prove the human right? That we only know how to respond with violence?" "Thulkar, you forget your place," Vrkor growled. "No, I remember my place. I am greatest hunter in Vrakos history. 300 victories in single combat. And this human, Thulkar pointed at Dahyun, has shown more courage sitting still than I have shown in all my battles. The fortress shook as weapons fire struck somewhere nearby. The rescue attempt had begun in earnest. This is madness, Vrakor shouted. The human makes you question everything. Makes you weak. He does not make us weak, Greltok said quietly. He shows us we were never strong in the way we thought. We built everything on making others afraid. But what happens when someone is not afraid? Everything falls apart. That is not strength. That is fragile. More warriors were entering now, filling the corridor outside the cell. Dahyun could see they were divided. Some stood with Vrakor, weapons ready. Others stood with Thulkar and Greltok, looking uncertain but determined. The Vrakos civilization was splitting in half right before his eyes. Stop! Dahyun shouted. Everyone turned to look at him. Please, just stop for a moment and think. He stepped forward slowly, hands raised. Supreme Apex, you're right that I've changed things here. But I didn't come to attack you or weaken you. I just stayed calm. That's all I did. And if that's enough to shake your entire society, then maybe your society needed to be shaken. He turned to Thulkar and Greltok. And you're right that fear-based dominance is fragile. But that doesn't mean strength is wrong. It just means you've been defining strength too narrowly. Another explosion rocked the fortress. Closer this time. My brother is up there right now, probably flying straight into danger without a real plan. Dahyun continued. He's being brave and stupid at the same time. Your people built an empire on fear. That's also brave and stupid. Everyone here is trying their best with what they know. He looked around at all the assembled Vrakos. But right now people are going to die because everyone is too proud to step back and talk. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to walk out of this fortress. I'm going to tell my brother to stand down. And then if you're willing, we're going to sit down and figure out how to move forward. Not through fear, not through violence, just through actually talking to each other like intelligent beings. And if we refuse, Vrakor demanded, then my brother probably dies trying to save me. Your warriors die fighting him, and everyone loses something valuable. Is that what you want? The silence stretched out. Outside, weapons fire continued. Inside, two factions of Vrakos stared at each other across an ideological divide. Finally, Thulkar spoke. I will not kill him. That is treason. Vrakor roared. No, Thulkar said calmly. That is courage. Real courage. The kind the humans showed us. The fortress courtyard had become a battleground. Terran fighters screamed overhead while Vrakos defense guns fired into the sky. On the ground, warriors rushed to defensive positions. But they were confused, disorganized. Half wanted to fight, half wanted to stop. Dahyun walked out into the chaos with his hands raised high above his head. Beside him walked Thulkar and Greltok. Behind them, Supreme Apex Vrakor and his loyalists watched with weapons ready. A Terran fighter swooped low, recognizing Dahyun. It was Taemin's ship, Big Brother. Taemin's voice crackled over the open communication channel. We're getting you out. Hold on. Taemin, stand down. Dahyun shouted back. Nobody needs to die today. They kidnapped you. They're monsters. They're confused. There's a difference. Dahyun looked up at his brother's fighter as it circled overhead. Please just land and talk to me. There was a long pause. Then Captain Minji's voice came over the channel. All Terran forces cease fire. I repeat, cease fire. The Terran ships pulled back but stayed close, ready to resume fighting in an instant. On the ground, the Vrakos warriors lowered their weapons but didn't put them away. Taemin's fighter landed in the courtyard. The canopy opened and he jumped out, running toward his brother. He looked ready to fight the entire Vrakos species with his bare hands if necessary. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? Taemin checked his brother frantically for injuries. I'm fine. Mostly bored, actually. Dahyun put a hand on his brother's shoulder. You need to stop trying to rescue me from situations that don't require rescuing. They're the Vrakos. Everyone fears them. I don't. Taemin finally seemed to notice the massive alien warrior standing nearby. His hand moved toward his sidearm. Thulkar tensed. Don't, Dahyun said quietly. Please, Taemin. Trust me. Another ship landed, larger and more official. Captain Lee Minji emerged, along with Dr. Park Hana and Operative Yoon Jiwoo. Hana ran straight to Dahyun. You idiot, she said, checking him over with a scientist's careful eye. Do you have any idea what you've done? Started an accidental philosophical revolution? Daehyun offered. The Vrakos Empire is splitting apart. We're monitoring communications across all their worlds. Some colonies are declaring independence. Others are pledging loyalty to the old ways. You've caused a civil war just by not being scared. That seems excessive. Supreme Apex Vrakakor approached with his guards. The Terran forces tensed. Vrakos warriors tightened their grips on weapons. Everyone was one wrong move away from a bloodbath. Enough, Daehyun said, stepping between the two groups. Everyone is acting like this has to end in violence. It doesn't. Nobody here actually wants to kill anyone. You're all just doing what you think you're supposed to do. He turned to Vrakakor. You think you need to destroy us to prove you're strong. But you already know that won't work anymore. Half your people are questioning everything. Killing us won't make those questions go away. Then he turned to Captain Minji. And you think you need to fight them because they're dangerous. But fighting them just proves their worldview correct. That everything is predator and prey, strong and weak. So what do you suggest? Minji asked. We talk. Like adults. Like intelligent species who can solve problems without killing each other. Talk about what? Vrakakor demanded. You have destroyed everything we are. No, Tulkar said, stepping forward. He has shown us that what we are was fragile. Built on making others afraid. When someone not afraid, everything falls apart. The great warrior looked at his supreme apex. That is not the human's fault. That is our own weakness revealed. Vrakkor's eyes burned with anger and something that might have been fear. You betray your own kind. I try to save them, Thulkar replied. Our old way is broken. The human proved this. Now we must find new way. Dr. Park Hana stepped forward, her scientific mind already working on solutions. What if we helped both sides? The Vrakos who want to maintain traditional ways could have their own territory. Those who want change could have theirs. A peaceful division. That is coward's solution, Vrakkor growled. That is wise solution, Greltok countered. Not everyone changes at same speed. Some need time. Operative Yoon Ji-woo, who had been quietly observing everything, finally spoke. I've been on your world for 3 weeks, disguised and watching. I've seen the arguing in your streets, the confusion in your youth, the fear in your elders. You're already divided. The question is whether you'll split violently or peacefully. The courtyard fell silent except for the wind and the distant hum of idling ships. Finally, Vrakkor spoke. If we agree to this division, what guarantee do we have that humans will not take advantage, will not conquer us while we are weak? Captain Minji looked to Daehyun, who sighed. You don't have a guarantee. You have to trust us, just like you're asking us to trust that you won't attack us. That's how peace works. It's uncomfortable and uncertain, but it's better than the alternative. Thulkar turned to his supreme apex. I have fought 300 battles, won everyone. But this human has taught me something I never knew. Sometimes the greatest victory is the battle you do not fight. Negotiations began that afternoon in the fortress's great hall. Representatives from both Vrakos factions sat with Terran diplomats. Dr. Park Hana provided information about Vrakos biology and culture. Operative Yoon Ji-woo shared intelligence about the political divisions. Captain Minji ensured Terran security interests were protected, and Daehyun, who just wanted to get back to flying cargo ships, found himself in the middle of everything. Translating not just words but entire philosophical frameworks, helping both sides understand each other. Taemin watched his brother work with a mixture of pride and confusion. How are you doing this? You're just a cargo pilot. I'm a negotiator who became a cargo pilot, Daehyun corrected. And honestly, this isn't that different from hostage situations. Just with bigger stakes and weirder participants. The negotiations took 3 days. In the end, they reached an agreement. The Vrakos Empire would split into 2 nations. The traditionalists, led by Vrakakor, would maintain their territory and their ways. They would continue to value strength and dominance, though they agreed to limit their expansion and follow basic galactic laws. The reformists, led by Thulkar with advice from Greltok, would pursue a new path. They would redefine strength not as the ability to cause fear, but as the capability to overcome challenges. They would establish diplomatic relationships with other species based on mutual respect rather than intimidation. Both nations would maintain peace with each other and with humanity. When the agreements were signed, Vrakkor approached Daehyun one last time. You have taken our strength from us with words. This is more powerful weapon than any we possess. We will not forget this. It wasn't quite a threat and wasn't quite respect. Something in between. 6 months passed. Daehyun returned to his cargo runs, though now he often found himself redirected to diplomatic missions. Dr. Park Hana frequently traveled with him, helping the reformist Vrakos develop new cultural practices. Their professional relationship had slowly become something more personal, though Daehyun was typically oblivious to this fact, until Hana had to explicitly tell him they were dating now. Taemin faced a court-martial for his unauthorized rescue mission, but was pardoned due to the positive outcome. Captain Lee Minji became his mentor, teaching him that courage without wisdom was just recklessness with good intentions. Yoon Ji-woo was promoted to head of Xenospecies Intelligence Operations. Her network of contacts within Vrakos society proved invaluable for maintaining peace. The reformist Vrakos struggled at first. Centuries of cultural programming couldn't be changed overnight, but with guidance from human psychologists and philosophers, they slowly developed new traditions, meditation practices to control emotional responses, merit-based hierarchies rather than fear-based dominance, scientific cooperation with other species. Greltok became the first Vrakos to study at a Terran university. The sight of a 12-foot armored warrior sitting in a philosophy class became surprisingly normal after a few weeks. The traditionalist Vrakos kept to themselves mostly, but even they were changing gradually. The knowledge that fear-based dominance was a choice rather than a natural law had affected even those who rejected the conclusion. They were more cautious now, more thoughtful about when and how they used intimidation. News of what had happened spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began to question their assumptions about power and fear. The Vrakos, once the most feared beings in known space, became instead a cautionary tale about the fragility of strength, built on fear alone. 1 year after the incident, Daehyun received a message from Thulkar. The great warrior had written a book called The Strength of Stillness, exploring the philosophy behind Daehyun's approach to fear. It was becoming required reading at negotiation academies across multiple species territories. Daehyun read the book during a long cargo flight. Hana sat beside him in the co-pilot seat, working on her own research about cultural transformation in warrior societies. "You changed an entire civilization," she said without looking up from her work. "That's pretty significant." "I just didn't panic," Daehyun replied. "They did the hard part of actually changing. Still, most people can't do what you did. Most people don't work hostage negotiations in Seoul for 5 years. You learn to stay calm or you don't survive." He paused. "Though I admit this situation was definitely outside my usual parameters." The communication console beeped. A Vrakos voice came through, but this time it was calm, even friendly. "Terran Vessel Morning Comm, this is Reformist Patrol. You are clear for passage through our space. Safe travels." "Thank you," Daehyun replied. "Appreciate it." As they flew through what had once been the most dangerous territory in the galaxy, Hana smiled. "You know what the scariest part is?" "What?" "You actually didn't mean to do any of this. You were just being yourself, just staying calm like you always do. And that was enough to change everything." Daehyun considered this while watching the stars pass by. "I guess sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is just refuse to play by the expected rules. The Vrakos expected everyone to be afraid. When I wasn't, it broke their entire framework. So what's the lesson? That fear is a choice. Power is more complicated than we think, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just sit still and refuse to panic." The ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving the former Vrakos Empire behind. Somewhere back on Krevnar, young Vrakos warriors were learning meditation techniques from human teachers, learning that strength meant capability, not intimidation, learning that respect was not the same as fear. The galaxy had learned something too. It learned that the most terrifying thing you could face was not a monster that didn't flinch at danger. It was someone who simply didn't acknowledge your power over them at all. The apex beasts of the galaxy had feared nothing, until they met a human who didn't flinch. Not because he was unafraid, but because he understood that fear was just information, just sensation, just a choice. And sometimes choosing calm was the most powerful thing anyone could do.